All right, guys, so here we are in our last study session. We're going to go over a ton of stuff for ecology, and then the last little part of the packet, I'm going to have you look up some different things about the body systems, and those are things we just covered. You can use Google to answer the rest of the questions in the packet once we get to that part. So we first talked about in your packet, so we have our packet study session 3. It's asking us what the difference is between biotic and abiotic factors. Well, biotic factors are all the living things in an environment. So grass, trees, fish, birds, insects, worms, anything alive. Abiotic factors are the non-living parts, so like temperature, moisture, light, soil, rocks, whatever. Anything non-living are abiotic. When we talk about ecology, we have these different levels. So ecology is the study of interactions between organisms and their environment. And our levels, we start with the biosphere, which is all the living things on the planet. From there, we can divide that up into different biomes like desert, tundra, forest, and so on. We can go and look at specific ecosystems, like maybe we're just going to look at a specific rainforest in Costa Rica. From there, we can go even deeper and look at the different communities, the different organisms living in that ecosystem. Then we can look at a specific population of one type of organisms living in that environment. And then in that population, we can narrow it down even more and look at one individual organism, one particular thing. As we study organisms, we study their habitat, so where they live. We study their niche, which is like, or their niche, which is like their role and what they do in their environment. Then we also look at their trophic level, which where are they in the food chain or the food web? So populations. Populations are members of the same species living in the same place at the same time with the potential to interbreed. And we can show population growth. Now, exponential growth, we show with that J curve where things are just growing and doubling and doubling and doubling, which we cannot sustain for a long period of time. And then we have logistic growth, where it's more of an S-shaped graph. And over time, our populations level out. And this is due to a thing called a carrying capacity, which is the maximum number of individuals that environment can support and maintain. So populations are generally limited by things called limiting factors like disease and competition that are density dependent, so how many individuals live in that area, or density independent factors like natural disasters, like floods and hurricanes. So populations can be limited by these different things. Things also that affect populations are the births and the deaths happening in that population, and then immigration and emigration. So new individuals entering an area, and emigration, different organisms leaving an area. We talk about the different interactions in the communities. We have competition. So we have different things competing. We can have the same species competing. We can have symbiosis, where two organisms are living together in some form of relationship, like in commensalism, mutualism, or parasitism. Also, we have succession. Succession shows how our ecosystems change over time. And we have two kinds, primary succession and secondary succession. When we talked about this, primary succession starts on an ecosystem where there was absolutely nothing there before. It's like bare rock or sand, nothing there. And slowly we start to see grasses and other things form. And these ecosystems get started by these things called pioneer species. And then we have secondary succession. Secondary succession happens when there is like a natural disaster, like a hurricane, a flood, a farmer plowed a field, but we still have soil present. So that ecological succession can happen a lot faster. Primary is where nothing was there before, no soil, no nothing, just bare rock or sand. We can show interactions with food chains and food webs, and we can see these different levels or different trophic levels within these ecosystems, okay? Always, we start at the bottom of our pyramid with producers, and producers get their energy from the sun. We move up from there to be the things like primary consumers are generally herbivores that eat the plants. Move on to our secondary consumers, are things that eat those plant-eating things, and so on. Now we talked about an energy pyramid. The pyramid energy illustrates the amount of available energy decreasing at each trophic level as we move up. And we talked about this a lot in class. So down on that bottom level, that's where we find the producers. 100% of available energy is down there at the bottom because they get their energy directly from the sun. There's no metabolism that needs to happen. But as we move up, things have to eat other things. And when they do that, they have to burn or expend energy to do so. So they lose the amount of energy. So every level, we divide it by 10 as we move up. So 100% of available energy down below, we divide that by 10 moving up, that's only 10%. We divide that by 10 again, we had 1%. We divide that by 10 again, we get 0.1%. That's because 90% of the available energy from level to level is lost as heat due to metabolism. We also talked about these different cycles. We've got the water cycle. You can take a few minutes and just fill in some of those parts. An important thing to pay attention to here is transpiration. That's evaporation of water from plants. When they do photosynthesis, they take in water, but they also do cell respiration, and so they lose water as well during that process, and that's transpiration. Then we have our carbon cycle, and again, organisms take in oxygen, and then they release carbon dioxide back into the environment. Burning of fossil fuels adds carbon to our environment, factories, burning of different things. So carbon enters our environment in several different ways, and then plants recycle it and turn that back into oxygen for us. Human impact on the ecosystems. Well, we change the landscapes all the time by building and farming, using different goods. We can use renewable resources, things that can be replanted or put back into the environment. We also use up a lot of non-renewable resources like fossil fuels that cannot be replenished in a reasonable amount of time. And so we need to worry about doing things that are sustainable development, making sure that we provide for human needs while preserving those ecosystems so there's stuff for future generations. Next, we talked about biotechnology, and there's a couple different terms that we talked about when we talked about this. We talked about this section after genetics. We talked about these things called transgenic organisms that receive a little bit, so recombinant DNA. It gets inserted into a host, like a bacteria, and that bacteria takes in different genes and includes them in their own DNA. And then we can insert that in something else. And actually we do this when we make insulin. It's made by inserting genes for human insulin into a bacteria. They take it in, and then we kind of gather that up and use that for injections in humans. We also have genetically modified organisms, or GMOs. And actually we've been genetically modifying things to make them less expensive, more nutritious, and have less harmful manufacturing processes. So GMO crops are produced to withstand droughts, be pest resistant, and also to have more vitamins and minerals and last longer on the shelf so we don't have so much waste. We also have stem cells. Stem cells are unspecialized cells from which other cells developed. And a lot of times we can take these from embryos and we can use those, or from the umbilical cord after a baby is born that's full of stem cells. And so you can keep that. And actually, if you need some kind of cells, they can actually repair or replace damaged cells. So that is a good thing. Sometimes people worry about these ethical issues because if you harvest stem cells, you can potentially destroy an embryo if you're harvesting before a baby is born. But those stem cells are also found on the umbilical cords. Oh, before I go on, gene therapy is injecting new genes into people that have diseases or disorders and having them incorporate those to help them fight their disease. Then we have DNA fingerprinting, and this analyzes specific sections of DNA, and those sections widely vary from individual to individual, and this is used to help to identify suspects in criminal investigations, as well as determine the paternity if we're trying to figure out who a father is in some cases like that. All right, the next thing that you are going to look at, we have a big chart right here for plant structures. We talked about these a couple weeks ago. You went through and you looked at these plant structures. So basically you're going to just look at these, write down the definitions for yourself, and become familiar with them, study them. Same thing here, some more plant structures. More plant structures. I've got some pictures here for you as well. When we talk about the leaves, here's a cross section of the leaf. On the top of the leaves, you're going to notice that there's these things called guard cells. Guard cells close and open around a little hole called a stoma. That's plural for stomata, okay? Now these little holes actually are where gases are exchanged, where our plants bring in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. Okay. Also, transpiration happens through there where they release their water. So as a plant like heats up during the day, their guard cells will close, so that stomata closes up so it doesn't release too much water. And then it will open back up when it gets a little bit cooler to release more things and have gas exchange happen there. Okay, so I also have a picture of the structures found in flowers. Please study that and review it. It does tell you what each of them are. The last part of this packet is going through those human body systems that we covered just a couple weeks ago in class. I want you to just look at the pieces of the brain, see if you can label those 4 lobes, the frontal, temporal, occipital, and parietal. I want you to go through, and you can Google the information for the cardiovascular system, like what is blood pressure. You also have it in your notes on those handouts that we did. Also Google stuff about the immune system, see if you can't figure those out. You might already know some of the answers from the assignments that we did. And then same thing with our reproductive system. And lastly, with fetal development. And again, you have a lot of this information already from the videos we watched and the handouts we did, but you can go through and Google this stuff to just quickly review with yourself so you have all the information. And if you have any questions, just feel free to email me, text me, whatever you need. Okay, thanks.